So I started Nebbia in 2019. And ever since then, I've noticed, and I think specifically with COVID, and when COVID hit, I was like, this is what I was saying, guys.
Exactly.
Now we've had to close the borders because we weren't able. Imagine if we didn't need anything from outside of Africa, because we
Who are
don't.
fully
The actual real truth is we don't. You know, we don't need anything from outside of Africa. But Africa had to close down because we are dependent on what comes from outside of it. But if we were actually fully sustainable, we would have been like, oh, you guys have Atiwat COVID.
Good for you.
Oh, sorry. Do you need you need food? We'll send you whatever you need. Us, we're good, and we would have continued. And that's like the whole point that I was trying to make about like just Africans doing things for each other and with each other. Where the point has gone.
Hello and welcome to the Millionaire Mind. My name is Turife, and joining us today we have Sinita, who helps people get pretty, or rather enhances their beauty. She's going to be telling us all about it. But before we get to that, hi.
Hi, Turi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Turi?
Welcome to our show. I'm good.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for making time. It has been a long time coming.
Yes.
Woo, this interview, it has been happening for weeks, but we're finally here. I'm glad it's finally happening.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you as well for having me.
Awesome. So please introduce yourself and what you do. First of all, I love the brass.
Oh, thanks.
It's so cute.
Thanks.
So-
African owned.
Exactly. Introduce yourself, what your name and what you do.
So my name is Sinita Akello. I am a creative consultant, a makeup artist, creative director, visual artist, a lot of things under the sun, but mostly I would describe myself as a beauty communicator. Yeah.
Okay, that's one way to put it. So how did you find yourself as a creative consultant?
That's a very good question. Well, let's backtrack like 10 years.
Okay.
So I basically started makeup in 2013. I also went into, I kind of segued into makeup through like a blog I used to run called Cultured Ego. So basically the blog was about alternative African fashion and music. And I would basically, at that time, I think we had like our Nancy Mwais, our Sharon Mundias, Joy Candies. They were like pretty much the three bloggers in Kenya. And basically I didn't want to be in front of the camera. I'm quite shy.
Yeah, we couldn't tell.
Yeah.
We can't tell.
So I used to get models, so I'd do their hair, dress them, and do the makeup, take pictures. And out of all of that, I enjoyed makeup the most. So I went into makeup, but throughout my career in makeup, I've been coming up with concepts, creative directing concepts, but obviously it was from the standpoint of makeup and then coming out into like a full image. So I guess like a creative consultant was like the where it would go, where it would end up, especially after like 10 years of like just creating visuals with friends and photographers.
Okay, that's a long time. 2012 to now, that's 11 years in the industry. So how exactly, you have mentioned how you started. It's all about styling people. You're working, or rather you're in the same category as the people who were back then. Because we used to go for inspo from Nancy Mwai and Hamtumba halls. We'd go to Joy Kendi.
What a throwback.
When she was starting out, before she cut her hair and everything. So now that's starting out as a passion project. How has the journey been so far?
Girl, gosh. So I don't, that's a very good question. Because when I look and think back, it was such an organic process. I kind of fell into makeup and it was so organic the way everything came about. It's only recently when I was like, okay, this could be a business that I started being more intentional. And I really do think, like, I thank the Most High because like the fact that it wasn't intentional, but it got me to a place where it was a viable business was that was like, I can say that was a blessing. But from when you kind of get to a place where you realize I could actually do this as a business and become intentional, the journey, funnily enough, I feel becomes a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because there's the intention there and intentionality to make something work. It's been a great adventure. It has its highs and lows. But all in all, I can say that it's something that I've really enjoyed. I appreciate the freedom that comes with running your own business.
True.
Obviously, there's the freedom, but on the other side, there's
The hard work
hustle.
that comes with
Yeah,
it. True.
exactly.
Okay, so you mentioned it started out as a passion project. This is what I'm really good at. I have an eye for things. I can spot something. This and this go together, and then it slowly morphed into now makeup. So now, what was the exact process of, okay, this is something I'm really good at. I have made a few coins here and there, but now how do I transition that into a viable business? Coming up with the name and everything, with merchandising, looking for clients, and so on and so forth.
Wow. Okay, that's a good question. So, I mean, there's two parts to it. There was me as a freelancer. So I was a freelancer for quite a period of time. And what happens with that is you do a good job. I really do believe in your clients basically being your best marketers.
True.
So it's much about like just referrals. So doing good work. I believe talent isn't enough. I think like it's also good to be efficient and somebody that people don't worry about working with. Somebody
True.
that will always show up. Your clients aren't worried that is she gonna show up today, won't she show up today? So just consistently just being an efficient person to work with as well. And then it kind of grows from there. The point that I actually decided that I wanted to do something, like to sort of like expand past myself, I think I had the lucky and amazing opportunity to be a part of like some amazing women that were featured on Vogue.com back in 2018. And at this point, I kind of just started thinking to myself like, okay, I'm in like the presence of such greatness. What can I also do to kind of like also think of myself in that? Because then I was a freelancer and like these women were, you know, building libraries and like had amazing fashion lines, you know? And I was like, okay, so how do I also now transition to become somebody that can maybe create something bigger than myself? And that's when the thought process started. But then from there, it was just kind of like, okay, well, if I'm going to do something bigger than myself, it has to mean something to me. And for the longest time, I would always kind of consider what brands would I work with? Who resonates with me? What resonates with me? And I would think, I think at that time Maybelline had brand ambassadors in the country, but for some reason it just didn't. You know, when you think about an idea and you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
I just didn't get that. And then it hit me. African owned.
Yes.
I'm a Pan-African. I love me. I think like a lot of the stuff that I have on, like the jewelry, the clothing is African owned.
Yeah.
And that was something that I thought, when I thought about it, is when I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. Yeah.
Okay, so looking at your profile, you have a very unique look to you. What exactly inspires that?
Oof. Okay, like the work, yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know what inspires it. I just feel like it's very me. It's what I want to do. When I first started makeup, this was what, 2013? In those days, like, I think there was like, what, 3 of us or like 5, you know? And I had the choice to either go in a direction that would pay me, which is like more bridal and beauty and stuff like that, or go in a direction that would fulfill me. And I'm an artistic person. I did art all throughout school. I think I describe myself as a visual artist as well. So I decided to just kind of pave that path for myself. And I think I can't really say what inspires it. It's just something that's very much within me that I want to express. I will say though, there was an image that I saw from one of my like favorite makeup artists who inspires me as well, Pat McGrath.
Yeah.
I saw that image and she's kind of used like sequins to create like this eye look. And I remember seeing that and being like, that's what I want to do. That's the kind of stuff that I want to create. And from there, I kind of made the decision to be intentional about the kind of work that I did.
Awesome. And now let's talk about, you have talked about how all your products are, you know, made in Kenya by Kenya. You're a real fan of sourcing everything locally. So have you found that more fulfilling, or has it come with its own limitations?
So I'll say the products are African owned, not made in Kenya.
Okay,
so there's a
African-owned.
difference between made in Africa and African owned. At the moment, unfortunately, we don't have the technology to make our own products. So a lot of people make products from maybe Korea or China,
And ship
England,
them and
Belgium.
rebrand.
Yeah, exactly. And then they kind of like, some people are heavily involved in the process, and then other people, it's especially during COVID, I think there was a spike in COVID where everyone was kind of doing beauty brands because it's great business. So I do African owned.
Like, is it a better experience for you? It aligns more with your brand and everything you do, but at the same time, has it come with its own limitations?
It does come with its limitations, and the limitations that it comes with are positive. And I say are positive because like even when we think about like for instance, today I was just watching a clip about how Kagame and Ruto opened up the borders for all Africans to sort of like be able to come visa free. I find it crazy that to go on a 45-minute flight next door to Uganda is more expensive than going to Europe. And like those are the limitations that I've been discovering that I have kind of been like, those that needs to change. We need to be able to like be able to get products from Ghana or from Nigeria just like this because we're in the same continent.
better.
How is it easier to get something from outside of the continent than inside of the continent? So those are limitations. However, I think it's a positive find because I think that can also start to change the fact that it's so expensive to go next door, 45 minutes, and it's really expensive. Why? You know? And those are the things that I think need to change as Africans. We need to be able to work together to build our continent and also our individual countries as well.
Okay. You had talked about earlier about Maybelline and how at a specific time, I think it was the only makeup company that was working in collaboration, especially with Kenyan influencers. Did you feel like because of the stand that you've taken, you know, when it comes to your business, to what you do and your creative direction, did you feel like sometimes turning down collaboration from such companies is it's on the negative side for you?
Well, those companies have never reached out to me anyway.
Oh.
So so I think so there's a difference between me and then my business. My business is African owned. I still work with brands like MAC, like Benai, simply because at the moment African brands haven't reached a level where they can do things like creative things like for creative makeup, for instance. There are a couple of Kenyan brands that do that, like Graysal, so shout out Graysal. Basically, I still work with a lot of brands that are not African owned, simply also because of the technology. So the thing that I always tell my clients is like, we use exclusively African owned brands. However, the goal is the mission is to get the makeup to work for you. So I'm not going to use only African owned, but then like it having a limitation to the client. So wherever there's strong brands or strong products that are not African owned, we definitely use them because the point is to also make the makeup stay and
Exactly.
sustainable.
Yeah.
So it's I think if I were to open a business that was like, just use some African, it's not as a strong standpoint
Yeah.
as saying use all. The point is not for us to use everything African owned, but for me, where it came from is trade is a two-way street. I find that we get a lot of products that come from outside, and we as Africans also, I think it's positive that even now we're getting to a point where there's products like Epara, Amicole, topicals that are also like trading out of Africa as well. And that was the point for me. It was, it's let's make this a fair trade. Don't
Yeah.
just constantly bring us what you've got. Let us also show what we have.
A lot more inclusivity in the
Exactly,
beauty space.
exactly. And so for me, that was the point. It was like, this is the point that I'm going to make. So having said that, there's Nebbia Artistry and then there's Sanita. Nebbia Artistry is exclusively African owned, but Sanita is what works for her looks. Obviously, when it comes to, I don't know, for me, take this outfit for example. I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful, you
It
know,
is.
and like I would see something and think, wow, that's so gorgeous, or that's so cool. And then when I learned on top of that, that the person that made it is African, there's something that I feel inside that I can't describe in words, but
Yeah.
just it's that extra like
It's
fulfilling.
my people.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
doing something, yeah.
Exactly. And I'm proud. I'm so proud. So for me, that's what it is. Like if we get to a point where I'm using all African owned brands, I would love that. But then I'm not trying to also say shout out European brands or like
Yeah.
brands from everywhere else. But then the point that I'm trying to make is trade is a two-way street. So
Okay.
as much as you bring it in, we also want to share with you.
I get that. I absolutely get that. So it's been 10, 11 years in the industry. What are some of the moments that have stood out for you where you felt like, Sanita is actually making strides. I am doing something. They know my name. Or, proof of concept that, I have done something incredible. What are some of those moments?
I think Vogue was a massive one. I'm really grateful I'm really proud of Vogue. I'm really grateful for Vogue. Not just being featured on like Vogue Italia, but then also having the team of Vogue coming to Kenya and then being part of that team. That was massive for me. Opportunities to travel for work. And I think one thing that I would say that's maybe quite, it's very aligned with what you said about proof of concept.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when I had to make the choice of like, am I going to go the bridal and beauty route or am I going to go the creative route? That was a risk.
Yeah.
That was a risk to take. But then by growing my portfolio in that way, whenever we had clients that requested portfolios, usually mine would always stick out. And I think for me, that's where proof of concept, I was like, oh, okay, so it works.
Mine works.
And that took a while to come back, just being able to create work that resonates with people, that stands out with, I mean, after 10 years, still only 4,000 followers, but
You know what?
so it's not, for me, it's not, obviously also that's proof of concept that it's actually not about the followers, because it's more
about
about
the
behind,
impact.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't know, I'm not tech savvy, so Instagram's never been my thing, but like,
well, we're gonna work on it. I will hold her hand from today henceforth.
and
Okay?
I will hold you to that as
Yeah.
well.
Because at the same time, as much as we don't want to rely on technology, become completely dependent, it is a really important aspect, especially when it comes to businesses.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience, especially when it comes online, with people, you know, trying to get your work? When you post your work, do people steal it and try to pass it off as their own? Have you had such experiences?
I have, but you know, that's when you're like, Mama, I made it.
I think that's when people do that.
I think, you know, your first reaction is going to be, how dare you? But then they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah.
So, you know, the first reaction is, but then it's like, oh, okay, I see you and thank you. But then also follow up and just kind of be like, that's not okay. I think I've had one instance when that happened with my work that I know of. And then also my name, the name Cultured Eagle. Someone tried to steal that as well. So I was like,
be original, guys. As in, come to her DM. Do you know, it would be so much easier if someone just, you know, approached you and said, hey, listen, I'm thinking of doing this and this and this. I have seen your work. I'm a huge fan. Maybe you could give me some tips. That would be, well, utopia, if you're being honest. But people just take the route of, it's easier to just snatch this and use it as my own.
I mean, we do have people, and I do get so, I'm very humbled because a couple of times people, like makeup artists, come and they're like, I've done this work or I've seen your work and I'm working on a look that is inspired by it. Do you mind? And I'm like, of course not. And I think I think it's great, as long as you're also saying where the inspiration came from.
Yeah.
But I think I'm very humbled and honored to like be in a space where that's something that happens as well.
Awesome. So we have talked about the things that have stood out for you and the very good and important moments. But what challenges have you experienced in the close to a decade? And you know, you don't look old. You look pretty young. So now we're trying to guess your age, because at the same time, black don't crack.
I started this when I was 12. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Wow. So what challenges have you experienced, and more so as a woman in business? What are the challenges you have experienced?
Whoa, girl, I made a list. Let me pull it out.
Okay.
For you. No, I'm joking. Money is always a thing.
Yeah.
Money is always a thing, whether it's waiting 1 year or 2 or
be paid.
to be
Chasing
paid.
people.
Like I've waited literal years to be paid. There's also just haggling with people. You know, by the time you've kind of made a name for yourself, unfortunately, we're still in a space where people don't really understand the value that you bring. So there's haggling. I've had to go back and forth with a client about why I'm charging that amount of money. What other challenges are there? There's that. There's also just like even, you know, just the growth, you know, finding opportunities for growth, working on your craft. You know, like I've paid for programs while I was a makeup artist, just so, and I paid for a program that was a lot of money, but I think it was worth it.
Yeah.
Because after that program, it was called the Accelerator Program. After that program, like the way I presented myself really changed. And I feel like there's a lot of times where you look for information that you can't really find on YouTube.
Yes.
There's like a lot of information that, and it's that sort of subtle, those nuanced things that you would never think about. But that's where the for me, value is hidden in the nuances, not in like what is actually being put in directly in your face.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So now let's talk about, we have talked about inclusivity of makeup brands and makeup products. What has been your experience, especially as an African babe, trying out products and realizing, well, this was not diverse enough? And what has been your experience, basically?
Oh my God, I used to work at MAC, and a lot of like not even an African babe, but also dark skinned as
Yes.
well. a lot of like dark-skinned women would come in. I remember there's one dark-skinned woman that came in and she saw me, she's like, I'm gonna talk to you. And I was like, no,
Don't
because
do
I
it.
don't know if I can really, really help you. So like for me, I find that like a lot of brands will stop just a little bit darker than my skin tone or a little bit lighter. I've had to, there's a whole process and way I do makeup now because of that. Like it's something that I even, it's a weird way of working, but it's because of how my skin tone wasn't really like, it wasn't really included in the shades.
True.
So it's a lot of, I work with African brands, obviously. Black-owned brands as well, actually, is one of the tiers that we work with as well. So like on a global scale. I think in 2020, now we're in 2024, because it's now November.
Basically, we are done.
Yeah,
It's the
basically,
new year.
December is like 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I think we could do better for African brands. I don't know if I've even had to ask myself the question, like, is like darker toned pigmentation more
Harder
expensive?
to make.
Is it harder to come by? Because why as African owned brands also are we still kind of like going with the old narrative of that like no inclusivity when most of the people that live here, well, not most of them, but a lot of us have like darker skin tones and like still not understanding the range that we have as black people, you know, because we go from like yellow to red to orange to blue to
They
purple.
don't get the undertones or nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think like there's still a long way to go. I do give my feedback, and the feedback that I get from some brands is that it wasn't the trend, or maybe I want to think that what they meant by trend is it wasn't high on demand. But this was from a brand from a different country, not so much Kenya, and I feel like that it was Nigeria, but Nigeria has like a very high rate of people who bleach.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very different. I do feel like even with Kenyan brands, we need to explore deeper skin tones and like for people with like more blue and purple undertones. I feel like that's still a gap that hasn't been met to this point.
Even Fenty? Fenty's not doing God's work.
Fenty is, the thing is, okay, so before Fenty, there was Suzy Beauty.
Yes.
Suzy Beauty was the first brand I ever experienced that made me look darker with the darker shade, with the darkest shade. Obviously, there have been like business moves with Suzy Beauty.
Yeah.
Fenty is doing good. The thing with a lot of brands is like they say, here's your foundation now.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, okay, but what about lipsticks that might suit our skin tone? What about bronzers, you know? Because bronzers are still a thing. There was a blogger, an influencer that I was watching on Instagram, and she did a test in 2019 with different bronzers, and none of them, those were all the darkest bronzers, and none of them worked for her. Then she did it again recently. It got better, but still, you know, so it's not just about the foundations. You'll find that maybe the foundations work, but then with the concealers, there's like a huge gap, you know. So Fenty is great, though, when it comes to foundations. I'm trying to think of what else. There's Suzy Beauty. When it comes to face products, like color cosmetics, African brands are still, Kenyan brands specifically, more East African brands are still, I think, trying to
figure out what works for
yeah,
people.
exactly,
Yeah.
and quality, because you don't want to just kind of do anything, especially when it comes to face products. But yeah, it's good. There's still a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, a lot more can
Yeah.
be done. So it is a bold stance when you say I am working with African brands and black-owned, you know, brands. It's a really bold stance for a business to make. So what has been the feedback?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I started Nebbia in 2019. So Nebbia, by the way, actually comes from a Ugandan word from my mom's tribe. I don't want to say it because I hope Ugandans don't laugh at me if I say it.
If you butcher it.
And I will. Anyway, let me butcher the word. So the word is Nebietu, and that basically means it's ours. I think even Kikuyus can like kind of like get that, you know, because we're Bantus. So Nebietu, it's ours. It means
Okay.
it's ours. So I just took the beginning. So it was supposed to be like a FUBU kind of thing. So I started Nebbia in 2019. And ever since then, I've noticed, and I think specifically with COVID, and when COVID hit, I was like, this is what I was saying, guys.
Exactly.
Now we've had to close the borders because we weren't able. Imagine if we didn't need anything from outside of Africa, because we
True, or
don't.
fully
The actual real truth is we don't. You know, we don't need anything from outside of Africa. But Africa had to close down because we are dependent on what comes from outside of it. But if we were actually fully sustainable, we would have been like, oh, you guys have Atiwat COVID.
Good for you.
Oh, sorry. Do you need you need food? We'll send you whatever you need. Us, we're good, and we would have continued. And that's like the whole point that I was trying to make about like just Africans doing things for each other and with each other. Where the point has gone.
It's okay. Fully sustainable just from here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I've noticed is like actually people have been talking more and more about Kenyan owned, homegrown, African owned. I've noticed that those conversations are coming up more. When I did start out, and I started out more from a place of self-love, the conversations from some people were slightly different, unfortunately. I remember specifically kind of being horrified by one woman who was horrified at the fact that I wanted to start, like, she was basically like, I wouldn't trust any of the products that you would have on your, because there was like basically and this is why it came from a place of self-love rather than anything. The connotation is that we don't produce quality. So the main point, and I even our vetting process is actually quite rigorous, because the point is we're working with brands that serve quality. So I had mentioned in the beginning some brands, and I mean it was like a money maker in 2020.
True.
Some brands kind of like, that's a nice color, that's great packaging, slap my logo on it. Other brands are more involved in the process. So they'll travel to Korea, they will go and actually test the product, they will be a part of that process. And those are the brands that we want to highlight to show that, yeah, I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie, I love my people, but I get it. Sometimes we find a lot of the time that we're cutting corners, but then there are also those of us that don't, you know, and the ones that don't are the people that I wanted to highlight. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, but she is such a vibe. Thank you so much for coming through. If you have any questions or comments for Sinita, the number is 0770729366. And before we leave, where can we find you? On socials? Do you have a physical location?
Yes, so on socials you can find me under Sinita Akello, at Sinita Akello. That's SINITTAAKELLO.
I know that.
And then Nebbia Artistry, you can find Nebbia Artistry. I won't spell it as fast as my name, but you can find us on Instagram at Nebbia Artistry, and our new division, Nebbia Visuals, where we basically create content for targeted towards beauty brands, Nebbia Visuals. And if you want, you can come and visit us on Dennis Pritt Road at Seraph Lounge.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was all we had for you this week. We'll see you next week. My name is Turife, and goodbye.